The nature of the operation as to the fact that it concerned the UFO, or the flying saucers, as is better known. They explained to us that if and when anything happened concerning them, as far as relating it, discussing it with friends, relatives, even fellow officers, the statement to us was, don't even talk to yourself about it. You put it down on the report and take it out of your head, and that's where it ends.
In 1954, Army pilot Mel Noel was part of a squadron asked to film UFOs in the skies over the USA. Their film sequences of UFOs were shown at the base.
We were shown somewhere in the area 600 still photographs and a fair quantity of gun camera film that had been exposed just coincidentally with the sighting.
Soon the squadron sighted 5 objects without managing to film them.
It was 5 days later. We ran into either the same or another 5. And at that time, we felt we succeeded in getting them on the film. And approximately, I think it was a week after that, we ran into a total of 16 of the things. And we were having, at that point, some relatively severe psychological problems.
These were pilots in their early 20s, defenseless in the face of the UFOs. While they were observing them, something incredible happened. In their headphones, they heard a voice which said in English that they'd come in peace, but they were worried about what man was doing, and that the voice they were hearing was not a hallucination.
Their purpose of being here was to dissuade some of the influence. They made reference to nuclear development by man and the problems that would be created and had been created from it. And at the age of 21, it placed us in severe quandary of questioning and capability and opposing side ego and experience, but there was no humor. I mean, it was not fun at all.
What the Air Force hadn't made public was that its pilots had been reporting UFO contacts since World War II. The Air Force was so concerned that in 1953, it even sent its own planes on a mission to seek out and photograph flying saucers. Guy Kirkwood was one of the flyers. After 19 days in the air, he and his fighter group spotted 16 objects, 2 miles to the west.
They broke rank and just started moving all over. They were below us, they were above us, they were out in front of us, and accelerating, literally at lightning speed. And a dot in the distance, maybe several miles away from you at that point, maybe a pencil point, all of a sudden closing on you at the rate of several thousand miles an hour, and a 36-foot object, which is basically almost the same size as our aircraft, of a 36-foot wingspan. But all of a sudden, this thing is just closing on you faster than you're able to think.
After 2 more encounters with smaller groups of discs, the Air Force called off the mission because of the physical effects on the flight crews. Kirkwood went on to become a commercial pilot, and later he began to talk about his UFO encounters. That quickly earned him a visit from 2 government agents who told him to stop.
And they said, well, the government doesn't like the information being released, and to continue could be detrimental to your health.
I'd like to say, give an acknowledgement here to Gabe Green, especially since he's here. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. He's the one that talked me into talking about it. It was the sort of the end of the road for a frustrated seeking as to what to do with what happened. It would seem that we all, and all of those who are not here, are involved in a time in the life of a planet, a universe, or whatever, that instead of reading about history, instead of yesterday, or instead of wondering what's going to happen tomorrow, all we have to do is open our eyes because it's happening now. It's going on around us, It's all over the world, and yet we wonder how long the eyes have been closed, because it's been happening. It's not just started. Miss Forrester answered a oft-asked question as to why did you wait so long to do anything about this. I want to clarify a couple of points, though, Roberta, because it isn't exactly quite that way. As far as discussing our experience, it is a security matter. I don't know if you understand the interpretation of security or not by the government of the United States, but their interpretation is this is information or knowledge, tangible or otherwise, which is withheld from the public's knowledge for the public's safety. Many people will agree with this. I find, at least I have come to believe, that this is a form of mental rigor mortis. And it's prevalent. It's all over. People are too prone to accept. And it's very easy to be led or to be gullible, shall we say, because of our desires or because of what we are indoctrinated into. I have been affected by this as much as anyone else. Not so much now, but some years ago. It is very difficult to be objective about something which is unknown. Realism is something that's standing in front of you. It's a desk, it's a book, it's a window. I can touch it, I can see it. Things that relate to our common senses. We can begin to comprehend and understand those things. The entire thing is a mystery. Many people say, gee, you're an authority on it. Answer this, answer that. I know very little. It's true I may know much more than a lot of other people, but relative to the entire situation, I still know very little. Just like a mystery is like a mathematical equation. You have so many givens and you have so many unknowns. Now we're collecting the givens. And the more givens, the more theories we can evolve and we can develop. And from this, which is all of physics is theory, what somebody imagined, and it leads us to something until we have fact. Sometimes we are not sure of fact even when we see it. We're not used to it. Our environment has not been such. I mentioned before, it's difficult to be objective about something. And I want you to be honest to yourself when you weigh these things. I want you to understand that part of this was first person. The greater part of it was related to me and related to the other two officers involved. I want you to be objective about it. I want you to look at it by your instinct, shall we say. I find that it's never wise to pass judgment on anything at any time as such, unless I'm forced to. We all have our moments of truth where we have to make a decision, and we make 100 a day. But on something like this, it's so important that you must put the issue in the center and build the case, pro and con, alongside each side of it, and keep building that. Eventually, you'll know what the answers are, as long as you keep seeking. I mentioned before I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Gabe Green. After so many years, it's very difficult after the warnings of security, the statements, and the exercising to other individuals who were your friends, the violation of security. I think you'll understand why as I relate this to you. Let's go back now. This happened in 1953, in the early part of 1954. Can you hear all right? In 1953, we had just come out of the Korean War. None of us were involved in the Korean War. It had ended while we were in flight school. And we were assigned to a reserve squadron in the western part of the United States. And we were what you might best call line pilots. You had so many duties to perform. You had to fly so many hours a year. So much of it was gunnery, so much was cross-country, so much instrument time and aerobatics and such. And we hadn't been with the squadron very long, and we were taken apart, three of us, myself, a Lieutenant Orton and Lieutenant Verlinde, and we were notified that we were being released from our duties as line pilots, and we were being placed on an operation called Operation Units. They told us at the time it was a security matter, and they then took us into the briefing of it. We don't, to this day, know why we were selected for it. I don't know whether they just took the roster and threw darts at it on the wall, or whether they picked it for other reasons, but had been picked. They began by explaining the nature of the operation as to the fact that it concerned the UFO, or the flying saucers, as is better known. They explained to us that if and when anything happened concerning them, as far as relating it, discussing it with friends, relatives, even fellow officers, the statement to us was, don't even talk to yourself about it. You put it down on the report and take it out of your head, and that's where it ends. They briefed us with several hours of motion picture films that we had taken by government and military aircraft. They showed us many hundreds of still photographs, some which they'd taken by the government, many which I understand were confiscated from civilians. And we were instructed for a number of hours in specific aerial maneuvers, weave patterns, formation flying, the operation of the cameras. We were instructed, we were notified that all the armament, the weapons system, fire system had been removed from the aircraft. The aircraft were what were known as F-86A Sabre jets. These are one-place interceptor fighter planes. These planes became best known for their efforts in the Korean War, in which they were given the greater part of the credit for controlling the skies over Korea. Their standard fire system is 6 50 caliber machine guns. They carry much more at times, an assortment of different things, of rockets and napalm and bombs and such, but standard system is 6 50 caliber machine guns. These had all been removed, had been replaced with cameras, with gun cameras. Some of these cameras, we were informed, contained standard film. The others contained infrared film. If you're not familiar with infrared film will take a picture of something that you cannot see. In other words, you can be vectored into an area on a target that you cannot see by radar and take pictures of objects. You won't see them then, they only come out after the film is developed. After all of the briefing, we discussed it briefly. We had been turned over to a colonel who was not with the squadron. He was assigned to the operation out of Washington, D.C. We were to respond only to him, had nothing to do any longer with the squadron. He was our flight leader throughout the entire experience, and later on became a very close friend. At the time, however, he was as military as you can find somebody. Everything was just a strict order. He wanted to discuss nothing else, personal, social, or topics of the time in any other way, shape, or form. It was all business. The three of us, Orton and Verlinde and I, discussing it prior to the experiences, our common opinion was that nothing was going to happen. We were aware of the position of the Air Force on it, that there were many reports that The Air Force made claim to investigate these things, and we figured that we were, in essence, the dum-dums, that we were going through the paces to live up to these statements. In other words, we investigate these things, this is it. But we didn't really expect to see anything, let alone hear anything. The first few missions were, as we might say, orientation runs. We were closing up our formation flight under different conditions. We were operating at approximately 38,000 feet of altitude. That's between 6 and 7 miles above the surface of the earth. And we were operating over the Rocky Mountains of Idaho, Utah, and then on north. The first week it produced the first sighting. If I mentioned before, we had been instructed in formation flying. If you can imagine, we flew what is called a diamond formation. If you can picture a baseball diamond, second base is the flight leader. Third base is the left wing man. First base is the right wing man. Home plate is called slot position. I drew the slot position. I didn't like it, but it's what I got. The operation was to maintain this formation, this diamond formation. Upon a sighting, the formation was closed in. 60 foot was the wingtip to wingtip, and we were drilled until this became measurable almost to the inch. As soon as a sighting was made, a contact was made, visual contact, there was an order change, and we broke into a weave pattern. Now, the weave pattern operated this way. As soon as the formation broke, second base and third base broke starboard, in other words, broke right. And home plate and first base broke left on target, onto the target. If the target were dead ahead, it was all trajectory was all ahead. If it were left, it would be to the, of course, the home base and the first base would have first trajectory. If it were on the right, then the third base and second base would have first trajectory. As it happened, the sightings, and all of them were on to our left, and the first one to see them was Verlinde. He always saw them the first. I don't know why. And it wasn't what he said, but how he said it, I think, that got to all of us real quick. His statement was bogies 9 o'clock level. Bogies is just Air Force slang. It just means a foreign aircraft, something you don't know what it is. It's something that doesn't belong to us. And we were convinced of that because there were 16 of them, and they were operating in a vertical V formation. They were strung out 7 and 9, 7 aloft and 9 going aft. In other words, they were this way. They were operating about approximately the same speed. They maintained right alongside of us. We were operating at 680 knots. That was service speed. In military jets, there are two speeds, two air speeds. You have service and military speed. Service is a cruising speed, as it's better known in civilian aircraft. And military is everything you can put in the broiler. It's the afterburner. You can get up into over 700 miles an hour. We could not obtain Mach 1 or speed of sound in level flight, but we could obtain it in a dive. We very seldom did it because of the vibration incurred. So we really maintained at our service speed. They were maintaining at the same speed and the same altitude as we were. At this speed, their appearance was a relatively distinct physical outline with a best described aura surrounding them. I think perhaps the best way of relating this aura is if you have ever seen a street light or a neon sign in the fog, in the rain. They seem to be very fuzzy, and this is the type of an appearance that it gives. The effect upon myself, I was pretty excited. I didn't know what was happening. I'd never seen one of these things before, let alone 16 of them. And 1,000 questions race through your mind. And as fast as these questions come, you're moving. The weave was called, off we went, and we're closing on them. Now, we had been given very distinct closing minimum distances. In other words, you don't get too close. We already knew what had happened to aircraft that had gotten too close, and we didn't want to go through that. We, to the best of my knowledge, did not get any, very few, if any, photographs, pictures the first time. The reason being was that the cameras had been hooked up with the automatic gun sight system. This automatic gun sight is a little electronic wonder which pins the target, holds the target, goes through a series of electronic manipulations, and aims the guns and fires them. This all takes 20-some-odd seconds under standard conditions, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't fast enough. It took too long. And I think the cameras triggered several times, but it was too late. We had to bank off on the opposite leg by that time. If you can picture this weave, of course, the weave is, I don't know if you can picture it this way or not. We would break. We're in our formation. This is the slot and the right wingman. Break to port, to left. We are now closing on a target, a common target. We have a closing trajectory. In other words, if we were to go to target, we would collide ourselves. So as we would reach approximately 100 feet wingtip to wingtip, the wide man would go low. He'd go under, and the near man would come over and reverse position. We would then reverse, and we would be heading back 180 degrees, or 90 degrees, I should say, on our next leg back. In the meantime, the other two men had reversed their leg and were now heading on target. The effect or the purpose of this was to have two aircraft on the same target at all times. In other words, confirming evidence, opinion of pilot as well as camera. Whatever was produced, you were two people looking at the same thing at the same time. At the same time, when you reversed your leg, you were blind. You couldn't see it, but the other two pilots were covering you at all times. If anything were happening, they would notify you. Our weave pattern didn't go on very long because they broke their formation into 4 groups of 4. This answered a question. We thought perhaps they were centrally controlled by one unit, that they were locked on a control. However it was, we didn't know how they were propelled. And they split into 4 groups of 4, and then after just a minute or so, they split individually. And they demonstrated some things that by the book can't happen. And it's like the bumblebee, he can't fly. That's by the book, but he doesn't know that. So he goes ahead and does it. These things were doing things that you couldn't do in the air, according to the book. It was impossible for a human being, if there were human beings in them, we didn't know then, to survive the braking from what we were estimating as their top speed is approximately 3,000 miles an hour to a dead stop. And I mean instantly. Just as fast as when you turn the switch, the lights go off. That's as fast as they stop. And they accelerate just about as fast. When they turn the juice on, they're going. As they would accelerate, when they would stop, the physical outline was very clear. They were approximately 150 to 180 feet in diameter, about 20 to 30 feet thick at the widest midsection, cross-section. One point that we didn't agree on was whether a center section of approximately 30 to 40 feet in the center of the saucer raised out of it when they would stop. It was so difficult, they would operate so fast, and our observation was most times so limited, it was difficult to tell whether this center section was raised all the time or whether it just elevated when they would stop for observation. As they would accelerate, the haze around them, the aura, would change color just like the spectrum. In other words, if you were to just go over the spectrum, it would advance through those various stages. There was no evidence of sound. We, of course, being sealed in, we couldn't smell anything. We couldn't feel anything. Other than slight compass malfunction, we did not have any instrument malfunction. All systems operated normally. But compass malfunction is not unusual anyway. You get this in many areas. And we didn't experience any uncomforting effects ourselves, other than what we might have put our own minds to. The entire experience lasted about 8 minutes, and as quickly as they had appeared, we didn't see them coming, but as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. And I mean, they go. And they strung off just like a string of beads, and you can count them out of sight. We were very excited about the entire thing. We had this certainly was something new. We didn't know what to think of it. So far as we knew, we were safe. Everything was going along fine. When we landed, we were reminded of the security. We were given the reports. We filled the reports out. Whether we got any films or not, we don't know. They pulled the cans as fast as we landed. And we never did see theirs, or we didn't even know where they went. The security was constantly pointed out to us. It was reminded to us exactly not what would happen but we had an example of this not during our experience, I shouldn't say this, but it was right around the same time. One of the line pilots, he was not on the assignment, but just in his regular line duties, had seen a few of them. And he decided that he was going to tell more than just a few people about it. So he sold to Fawcett Publications what he saw. And he received $500 for his efforts, and within 24 hours after he had signed the contract with them, the article hadn't had a chance to appear, of course. Within 24 hours after he signed the contract, he was in the Aleutian Islands. He was reassigned. That at that time was commonly known as a suicide assignment. It's a one-way ticket. It's the one you get that you don't come back from. So, of course, this weighed over us. We thought a great deal about talking about this to anybody. Many, many questions occurred to us. We would discuss these for many hours alone, just the three of us, because the colonel wouldn't talk to us about it. We didn't know whether it was just happening to him or what was going on at that point. We flew a number of missions between the sightings without anything happening, and it was just like any other run. The second time was a few days later, and this time there were only 5 of them. Verlinde spotted them again. In the meantime, we had, by our recommendation, they had changed the triggering of the cameras from the automatic to the manual. There was the stick buttons, which meant that we could fire just to shoot as many frames as we possibly could at any time. And I'm certain that we obtained a number of photographs this way. I remember now that our calculations of aiming are up to us. It's up to our eye rather than by electronic calculation. If given the proper amount of time, the gun sight would have done a much better job. But in the case of expediency here, we didn't have enough time, so they had converted it. The second experience was just like the first as far as what we were seeing. We didn't know whether they were the same ones or not, but there they were, and there was just the 5 of them. They moved about. We noticed a lot of yo-yoing. It's a vertical oscillation up and down this way. When they would turn or change direction, there was no bank. They were unaffected, it would seem, by the various laws that had been drilled into us for months and months in flight school, laws of lift and drag and yaw and gravity. The force of stopping or acceleration didn't seem to affect anything or anybody that would be in them. We felt we were getting used to it, and yet something was going on inside of us that we hadn't begun to understand. It was all very exciting, and when something's exciting, you're only focusing upon what's happening, not what it means. This was brought home, I think, very seriously on the third sighting. When it was made, there was 5 again. This was just a couple of days later, and when Verlinde called, when he notified us that they were there, and at times you assume things, and you shouldn't do that. We assumed the change of position of weave, and in closed formation, 60 feet, tip to tip, you haven't got much room for mistake. And there was a little jockeying there because the call never came. We didn't call a change. And after, less than a minute, we had a change of radio channel. This was given to us in a code, which is what's called an inverted alphabetical code. If you take W, X, Y, Z and invert that numerically, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the way the codes were changed, or the radio channels were changed through this alphabetical system. We were given the letters. It took me, probably 20 to 25 seconds to invert the letters, and figure the numerical values, and then to spin it in. And when I did, I didn't know. Of course, in that short span of time, you're not wondering why you're doing something, you're just doing it. And this is just part of your orientation. You go through quite a bit of moment of truth searching during something like this. You wonder why it's happening to you. You wonder what you're doing here, what this is all about. It starts coming to you when you have time to think about it. We thought we were getting used to seeing these things. We could live with them. But the experience of the communication was something that we weren't really ready for, and we didn't expect. We couldn't understand what this is all about. When I hit the channel, there was a voice speaking on it, and it was not me. It wasn't either of the group, anyone in the flight, or the other 3. And the voice was answering questions as such. Now, at no time did I ask any questions. At no time did any of the other 3 pilots ask any questions, utter any, verbally. And yet we were hearing something. It was coming through just like we were listening to or talking to each other or talking to a tower on the ground. It was very clear. The enunciation, pronunciation, vocabulary was excellent. The rate of speech was very slow. We were told later on by the flight leader, by the colonel, that he had been asking the questions. He said, I did not say any of them. He said, I was merely thinking them. He said, they did not answer all of them, just a few. The first statement that had been made, and we had to, at this time, remember, more or less read in what the question might be, which he later on told us. He said the first question was, do you believe in God? Now, he said the reason I asked him this was if there was somebody there, and they did, and if they did, then the odds were with us that they weren't hostile. And the answer, or the statement that we heard was, we believe in the almighty power of the universe. You must understand that there are over 150 billion universes, and that there are many forms and orders of gods in each and every one of them. I am not relating to you verbatim. After 12 years, I can't remember exactly word for word, but this is very, very close to the exact wording of what it was said. Something like this doesn't leave you as such. The next statement was referring to the existence of life here, where it came from, what they believed in. They said that the question had to have been, he said the question was, do I'm trying to think of what we decided the question exactly how it was worded, because the statement was, in effect, the existence of Noah or the Bible, the authenticity of it and such, and they said that they referred to it as an erroneous history book. They said, for instance, Noah's Ark was never a boat. They said it was an ark of time, or a period of time in which this man was a ruler, and he ruled over a civilization. And they said if we'd investigate the Latin, we'd find that Noah meant Inca, and that Incas were the last of the Noah civilization. And they referred to they made the statement that our scientists had made statements based upon theories that life cannot and therefore does not exist on the other planets in this system. And they said that they were confirming that statement, those statements. They said life does not and cannot exist on these other planets. It's all inside the planets. It's all in the interior, just as the house of the Lord. They said this is the house of the Lord. We live in the interior of the planet. And they stated that life originated here the same way, on the interior of the planet. And they said it still exists that way. The next question must have been as to exactly who are you or where are you from, because the statement was our crews are made up of individuals from the planets known to you as Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. And they referred to Saturn as the head tribunal planet. In other words, the leaders of state met here to discuss the affairs of state. They went into a number of other things that may or may not be important. By discussion with legal advice, there's much of this. I can only discuss approximately 10% of what took place. The total effect of the experience on us was when we landed, we couldn't walk. We were crawling. We were on our hands and knees, and we weren't ready for it. And all we wanted was out. And this is what we told him then. They gave us sedation. We told him, we said, we want out of this. We don't want any more to do with it. Any way we can get out of it. And whether it was his efforts or not, we were relieved of the assignment the next day. The one thing that was out of order was that as soon as we landed, he insisted, he dictated to us, and he said, you do not report the communication. He said everything else, but do not report the communication. This is unusual. We didn't care if we reported anything. It was a relief to get away from it and back to the regular duties. The problem was now, how do you live with it? I've talked to veterans of combat and seen some of the psychological effect of first-hand combat. I don't know if anybody here have ever seen combat. I have not. I hope you haven't, from what I've seen, the effect of it upon others. It's a brutal thing. And yet, some of this is similar to it. You weigh mankind. You weigh your own, and you weigh the thinking of the world. And you say, where does this fit? Where does this fit in my thinking, in my way of life? Well, I have no time for it. I haven't got the answers. I don't know where to go to get the answers, so I'm going to pass. I'm just going to go ahead like everybody else. There's a couple of 100 million people going and living, happy, and having a good time, and I can do the same thing. I can do without this. And it's not easy to do without it. Not that you want it. Something happened to you. You were involved, whether you wanted it or not. And here you are. Now what are you going to do with it? I discussed it with 2 people in 10 years. My father was one of them. And after I got through, I spoke to him for several hours. I told him everything. And he said, you didn't have to be in the Air Force for it to happen. I looked at him. I said, what are you talking about? Have you been there? do you know him? And he said, do you remember when you were back in prep school? He said, and I had just finished I was reading a book, he said, and I read this book, and he said, and I recommended it to you. He said that I thought it was an excellent work. And I said, well, that's a long ways ago. Hey, Dad. And he says, well, he said, what do you mean 4 years isn't long? And he said, it was longer than 4 years then. It was about 10 years. And he said, I told you to read Oahspe. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember now. And he said, you didn't read it, though. And I said, no, I didn't. And I said, it didn't pertain to my interests at the time or my school studies, and so I never got around to it. He said, you'll find much of what took place, of what the statements were in there. Well, I've just recently started the book. It's about 900 pages. It's not easy reading, not by my opinion anyway. I'm into it about 30 pages, and I'm already finding things. It's in there. Parts of it anyway, much of it. I also understand there's 2 different editions of this book, and one is not as correct or not correct, and the other one is, but I'm not sure which one is or isn't. This doesn't make it too easy. I hope I don't have to read 2 of them. It's a long book. Thank you. This was just the first part of it, because the real testing was coming into being. For about 2 months after we were off the assignment, we began to associate. We figured we could live with this thing. The 3 of us, the other 2 pilots and I, talked about it quite a bit. And we decided that we couldn't help each other very much. The answers weren't here. It was just opinion against opinion. We could only confirm what all of us had seen and heard. So where do you go from here? The colonel wouldn't talk to us. And about 2 months later, he called me up and he said, come on over, I want to talk to you. And I figured, well, boy, maybe this is it. Maybe these are the answers. When I got over there, Orton and Verlinde had already gotten there, and the colonel was very nervous. And he was pacing up and down. And he said, I've got to talk to somebody. He said, I've got to let you know what's happening. And we've just sat there with bated breath as to, well, let's have it. And he said, I've got to make a decision. He said, I'm not asking for your help in making the decision. He said, I'll do that myself. He said, I just want to associate with somebody who can understand. He said, and I think you fellows are the only ones that I can do it with. He said, I have found the truth. And then he made a statement which I think he was making for his own benefit as well as ours. He said, I am an officer in this government and this armed forces, the United States Air Force. And he said, I have a duty and a responsibility and an image to maintain. And he said, the truth doesn't agree with it. He said, I've got to go one way or the other. He said, I can't live with both. He said, I don't know what they do with what's happening, but it's not getting out. And he said, that's all. And it was. He wasn't going to discuss anything else. He said, we'll see you later. And bid us good night. And so what we thought was going to happen didn't happen at all. Except we didn't realize that he had opened the door. And we were in for almost, about 10 months of experiences of his that he related to us concerning these things. And it was several weeks later before he called again, and this time he called and he said, come on over. And he said, I'm going to let you in on it.